Welcome to the 440 here on the 440 Sports Network. Every single morning, getting you up to date on all things Nashville and sports in the state of Tennessee. And joining me today on our special Christmas debate edition of the 440 is Zach Lyons of the Football and Other F Words podcast from Broadway Sports Media. Michael Gillum is co-host. That is out every single Tuesday, of course. We'll get to what you guys covered, Zach, on that show in just a second. First of all, welcome. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy holidays to you too. Thanks for having me on. Sort of happy holidays, I guess, as we approach after the Steelers loss, and we're approaching this red-hot San Francisco team at home. So it may not be so happy holidays come Saturday, but we'll see.
How was the episode? Did you guys have any choice words on the Football and Other F Words podcast this week?
Well, we always have some choice words. Some of those choices are probably not safe for work, but we did have Mike on the episode, and we covered a bunch of the problems with the offense, because that's really all anybody wants to talk about is this offense and trying to nail down the issue of besides injuries. I mean, at some point, injuries we all know are the main concern, but what is the main issue?
Well, and I think that's what I want to talk with you about and have a little bit more of a conversation with you about this, because I don't get to do that much on this show. But I did find myself struggling with the Steelers game in particular, because I thought the Titans were the better football team. I think they looked like the better football team. They had the lead. They ran the ball for over 200 yards. They're averaging now over their last 4 games more yards rushing than they did when they had Derrick Henry. So you can't say it's not about the lack of support for the running game. I think there's clearly some calls with Todd Downing, especially that 2nd and 6 late in the game, where I'm just like looking at my family, my in-laws, saying, why is he not running the football? Tannehill's a huge part of this conversation. But you already said it. The injuries are number one. But once you get past the injuries, everyone is hurt in December in the NFL. Maybe not as badly as the Titans, and I'm not trying to – blame is not the right word here. I just want to figure out what's not working and why it's not working.
Yeah, I think what's not working is the play calling. And maybe it's not just the play calling. You could probably lump in play design too, right? I mean, once again, they fall below 31% of play action passes, and once again, it's a loss. It's at some point, play action passes need to be the bread and butter, especially when the run game is working, like you already talked about. They're averaging more yards without Derrick Henry the last 4 weeks than with Derrick Henry, and they've only won 1 game through that time, and that was when they went over 31% of play action passes. I mean, I get it. I knew yesterday or on Sunday when the Mike Keiths talked about, okay, play action fake, because I was in the car in the first drive, play action fake, Tannehill gets sacked, or I believe it was a sack on the first play or something like that. And I knew from there we weren't going to see a lot of play action from this team because they get gun shy. And Todd Downing is the problem with that, is you can't get gun shy and all of a sudden change your plan based off one play. And that's what I feel like he does a lot. You got to be able to call plays that benefit the players that you have. You got to quit trying to cram square pegs in round holes. And Tannehill isn't really a big issue, but you also saw last night when injuries or Sunday night when injuries happen, that Tom Brady, without Chris Godwin, without Mike Evans, and without Leonard Fournette, looked so pedestrian against the Saints led by Taysom Hill. I mean, give me a break. The injuries do factor in, but also play calling factors in.
I completely agree that you sort of have to begin the conversation with the injuries thing, right? Like,
right.
Of course, Julio Jones went out in the first half. You have to factor that in, and that's everything is sort of layered underneath that lens. But if you're going to tell me I'm going to get 200 yards rushing, my defense is going to play a near perfect football game for like the third straight week in a row, or second straight week in a row. I mean, you talk about gun shy. I see a lot of that from Tannehill too. And Vrabel talked about this last week. He's got to see the blitz better. He's got to adjust pre-snap better. He's taking too many hits because he's not seeing it. He's not throwing the ball away the right time. He's taking sacks. I mean, the fumbled snap is like that's not a Todd Downing problem. That's just right. That's an execution problem. And so, while and the other frustrating thing for me is Twitter is going to be 180 degrees, right? Like either you should dump and trade Ryan Tannehill or he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And that's just not reality. The reality is he's a solid player. He's a great fit for this offense when they're healthy. but we're seeing right now how limited he really is. It's not just the injuries. You cannot run for 200 yards and turn the ball over 13 times and be like, oh, he was perfect. Like it's Ryan Tannehill, it's Todd Downing. I want to move on to the defense, but I do think Tannehill has to. They both, as a combination, in my opinion, have to be better at being better prepared. I don't know what that means.
Let me ask you a question real quick, because it's something that has been on my mind since watching the Steelers game, is because I put out tweets saying that, Todd Downing could have had the game won, or it could have increased his chances if not been for his play calling, right? Yeah, turnovers happen. The refs things, the bad ref flags and all that happen. Bad penalties happen. But in crunch time, when it mattered, Todd Downing was driving the ship, and then he just basically sunk it. So, but let me ask you this. Last year, you saw a regression from an entire unit in the defense. And a lot of that was shifted to the blame of the staff for not having a lack of communication, not having the right figurehead in place for the players to go to. I look at this offense, and I know there's injuries, but it's eerily similar when you see regression from Taylor Lewan, when you see regression from Nate Davis, from Roger Saffold, you see regression from Ryan Tannehill. A.J. Brown was dropping balls, but when he was healthy, there's regression everywhere. And it seems like there's a lot of communication errors throughout this thing. And to me, turnovers equal last year's third down conversion rate allowed. Like, I kind of feel like Todd Downing needs a little bit more heat under his butt than what people are willing to give him credit for, because you're right. Players do have to execute. And that's what everybody said last year, right? Kevin Byard has to execute. It just seems it's very eerily similar, in my opinion, to the same situation.
It is, but I think you're right that it is similar. I think it's similar for different reasons. I think what's similar, like the defense to me last year was too overly complicated. Like they were asking them to do too much stuff too fast, pre-snap in particular. I think it's the opposite, but the same for the offense. Yeah. It's like they're not asking them to do enough pre-snap. It's like Todd Downing puts a play in on Tuesday. Here's the play we're going to run against this defense. Ryan Tannehill says, okay. The offensive line says, okay. Then they get to the line of scrimmage and they don't get the right look they want. And they still are like, okay, let's just run the play. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's like completely incorrect. But and this goes back to the Jets game where they were showing all out blitz and they were still running 7-step long drop play action passes. And that is on Todd Downing to stop calling that stuff. It is on the quarterback to check out of that stuff. And it's to have and again, Arthur Smith's pretty good. So let's be honest. That's a big factor here. So I see your point. I could totally compare it to what the defense did last year. I think in a different way. I think turnovers are interesting though, because a lot of times they sort of level out over time. 9 fumbles from the quarterback, 13 interceptions. Some of those are not on him, but some of them are. And
yeah,
I know he's got no weapons. And I wanted to move on and talk schedule and defense, but it does feel like we're grasping at answers here. I'm hopeful that they have a better grasp of it behind the doors at St. Thomas.
You would hope, but I don't have the confidence in Todd Downing that I had at the beginning of the year. And I think over time, I think that's okay to have that opinion. I think your opinion should be able to evolve over time. I thought Todd Downing could, with Julio Jones, create a better offense. And I get it. Not everybody's been healthy, but he's not adapting, and you're seeing them right now with less yards per play than he had in his first stint in 2017 over in Oakland. In Oakland, they ended the year with 28 turnovers. The Titans are already at 25. There's a lot of similarities that you can pull from Todd Downing's first stop in Oakland and his stop here in Tennessee. Yeah. And that's the common denominator is Todd Downing. Yeah. Just saying.
I think it's injuries plus Todd Downing plus Ryan Tannehill needs structure in his life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue. And hopefully, obviously, when these guys start coming back, they get back into the high level of execution. Defensively, just real quickly here. Defensively, though, this feels like a deep playoff run, Super Bowl contending type of defense that they're playing right now. I know it's the Texans, and I know it's the Jags, and I know the Steelers aren't exactly lighting the world on fire on offense, but they shut down the Chiefs too. They dominate. They got stops against Buffalo. Like this unit feels like it's better than it's been in a long time.
It's the best defense that I think the Titans have had since the Albert Haynesworth, KVB, Michael Griffin stomped the towel, 13-3 season that they had back then. I mean, it's almost over a decade ago. I think it is over a decade ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is the best defense that they've had. Credit to Shane Bowen, credit to whatever Jim Schwartz has taken part into this whole thing. Yesterday, they did a real good job. They didn't get a lot of pressures, but it's 10 pressures, but there was only 28 dropbacks. So that's almost 50% rate of getting pressures per dropback. So that's still, while that number looks low, it's still a good number to have when you look at from that perspective. This is a championship winning defense. And that's all. It's just so funny how the world has turned upside down for this Tennessee Titans team from 2020 to 2021. Last year, it was, man, if only this defense was, middle of the pack, right, they would have gone all the way. Now it's like, man, if this offense can just get healthy and be middle of the pack, they could go all the way because they have a great defense. So it's wild. It's a crazy season. The season did not turn out how anybody predicted in the process that it took to get to this point.
Yeah, I'm super biased, but I think because I just love the kid, but having a 27-year-old Zach Cunningham on this roster for the next few years is tantalizing to me. But that's just me.
Oh, it's gonna be so good.
I can't understand why that happened, but I'm thankful it did. The schedule, you and I talked a couple of weeks ago on this show about, well, you know what? There's 5 games left. It looks like they've got a pretty manageable schedule. By record, it was one of the easiest left in the NFL. A couple weeks later, it's a very different discussion. Now you've got a short week. You got to turn around on Thursday night and play a Niners team that's won 5 out of 6. The Dolphins next Sunday, although you'll get some extra rest, the Dolphins next Sunday have won 6 straight. Houston is what they are. They're a dumpster fire. But the other question, like the Colts have to go 3-0 and the Titans have to go 1-2 to lose the division. Even though the schedule has gotten what appears to be more difficult, I still don't think there should be much concern about losing the division. How do you feel about where the Titans are, schedule versus seeding in the AFC?
I feel pretty good because I think the Colts, they face the Arizona Cardinals next week. And while the Cardinals did lose to the Detroit Lions yesterday, it's a week-to-week league. And it's all about matchups. I watched that Colts game versus the Patriots, and I see horrible Carson Wentz, and they got bailed out by a defensive brain fart on a 60-something yard run on Jonathan Taylor to end the game. I mean, the turnovers from Mac Jones hurt their chances of winning that game. I think if you went to round 2, Colts versus Indy or Patriots versus Indy in New England, you're going to have a different story. I think that the Colts will lose to the Cardinals. I feel pretty good about this team's chances in the playoffs with hopefully getting Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown back. I am not too concerned that they will lose this divisional round or this division. I just don't see it. If I go down that hole and say that it is that way, then what good am I? Like, I'm not being objective. I'm throwing a pity party for myself, which fans can tend to do. They see one game and they think, oh, it's over. This Titans team is going to have its hands full with this 49ers team, but luckily they are on a short week too, and they're having to travel. That is huge for this team. And we have seen this team be able to stifle the run game. If they can stifle this run game, which is it's a very creative run game using Deebo Samuel back there. Jeff Wilson's looking good. Elijah Mitchell will possibly be back.
Yeah, if Todd Downing wants to take notes on how to be creative with your offensive scheme, especially pre-snap, just pop in the tape this week of Kyle Shanahan.
Well, you think being on the Titans staff with Arthur Smith, he could just, use that experience. He's an analytics guy too, because that's where he got his start. And, when I deep dived on Todd Downing when he was hired, I noticed, I think it was the Minnesota Vikings. He started on the analytics staff and worked his way through to coaching that way. So I'm sorry, we're going back to the offense.
I know, we're back to Todd
Downing.
Play action.
I don't understand his play action, perception. I just don't understand it. Ryan Tannehill is ranked 13th among quarterbacks in play action usage, and he was number 1 last year.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Derrick Henry has something to do with that, and so does A.J. Brown, but not all of it.
Yeah.
I think this isn't popular on Twitter, but it is somewhere in the middle, right? It's a little
Right.
it's a little bit of everything. The Niners, for some reason, the Niners game worries me more than the Dolphins game. The Dolphins are mistake prone. They do some stuff like, I think the Niners can just flat out coach you sometimes. And I think I would not be surprised if they lose to the Niners on a short week, come back and beat Miami with a little extra rest. A Miami team that makes some mistakes. You finish with a win over Houston. You get to 11 wins. I think people would, and especially if Derrick Henry's coming back, I think people would view that as a really successful season considering the adversity they've faced.
Yeah, it's a successful season either way. If they get to double-digit wins without Derrick Henry, I mean, for the majority of the season, that's pretty remarkable, especially with the win streak they went on in the middle of the year. You know, it was an improbable win streak, and I'm not going to be satisfied with not being in the Super Bowl, but I'm going to understand why they didn't get to the Super Bowl if they don't make it.
There you go. Listen to that. A sound, logical, reasonable, thoughtful take from Zach Lyons. I appreciate that.
That's very rare.
That's why we like you, man. Well, what do you guys give us a little bit more about what's on this week's episode of the Football and Other F Words podcast, out every single Tuesday from Broadway Sports Media?
So Mike Herndon makes his triumphant return. I'm sure you've seen his Twitter feed. He is basically taking the dad approach of, don't make me turn this car around, and he's taking off his belt to whip some Twitter followers right now, because
he's doing a lot of scolding. He's scolding people. Yeah,
he is scolding people. So there'll be a lot of that, and there'll probably be a lot of me and Mike disagreeing, just like old times. So just a classic F words episode.
There you go. Every single Tuesday, Football and Other F Words. Michael Gillum, Mike Herndon makes his return. Zach Lyons from Broadway Sports Media, and of course, right here on the 440 Sports Network. Zach, always a pleasure, my friend. Have a great holiday. Happy holiday, Merry Christmas, all the great stuff to all you and your families out there, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.